Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching. It was cloudy that day. The sun promised to come out for an hour in the middle of the day. But instead, contrary to the forecasts of weather forecasters and the hopes of citizens, it rained. The weather was as gloomy as the mood of the waitresses of the Golden Cube Cafe, which had been serving the local golden youth for 2 hours. What else did they order? Another waitress asked Maya. More vodka. Well, what else? If only they had a snack, they celebrate the successful passing of exams. Wow! And these are people with higher education, the elite, sons of senators and big bosses. I've been hinted twice already that I'm nobody here. And what can they do to me if I'm not nice? Kenny complained. Maya frowned. She worked in a cafe not so long ago, but everyone knew that this girl would not go into her pocket for a word. She felt sorry for Kenny. I wanted to go and advocate. Despite her small stature, Maya was not afraid of anyone in this world. She was an ardent fighter for justice and hated those who considered themselves superior to others, especially those drunken, worthless sons who drive expensive cars just because their fathers hold a high position. What have they achieved in this life themselves? On what grounds are others humiliated? Let me go out to them, Maya suggested. Kenny gave her an appraising look and shook his head. No. No. That will not do. You have now done things, and then we will fly from their parents. Sometimes, Maya, you have to bend over. You won't write anything. That is life. We are not equal and are not born equal. Maya shook her head and continued polishing the glasses. She could not sit without work and in her free time helped wash the dishes. Kenny gathered his courage and went out into the hall. The cafe was spacious, with portraits of various political figures and celebrities looking at visitors from the walls. The tables were longitudinal, semicircular on thick wooden legs. Light music was playing. They could not afford live music in the cafe, but sometimes young bands performed. Kenny winced at another flash of lightning outside the window and set the tray down on the table. Your order. Bon appetite. Maybe you want something else. The heavily drunk guys did not even notice Kenny, continuing to talk about their own, barely linking the words into a sentence. Here you are, Steve. Well done. You are my brother, one of his friends said, biting vodka with sausage. Snack was on the table in abundance, but the young guys preferred to just drink. An hour later, one of them approached Kenny. The waiter propped up the doorframe near the entrance to the kitchen. Brother, where did you go? And why should I look for you? Menacingly asked the drunk guy. He was the cutest of all. Snub nose, blonde hair. The bangs fell a little over his eyes, but his pretty appearance, like that of movie heroes, did not at all correspond to how this handsome man behaved. Did you want something else? Kenny asked, realizing that a scandal could not be avoided. Wanted? Guess you wanted to. Went, we'll tell you what we wanted. With these words, the guest took Kenny by the neck and threw him to the table. Kenny fell to the floor and slid across it almost to the table. Steve, so that he doesn't become arrogant. The guys at the table supported him. Bring us vodka. We pay and we order. And you went somewhere. We've been waiting for you for a long time. It's not good. Someone at the table began to lecture Kenny. The waiter got up from the floor, dusted himself off, and stood up as if nothing had happened. He hoped to the last to avoid conflict. Actually, for this, he went away from the drunken company. It was clearly time for them to stop drinking. Excuse me, I'm listening, Kenny replied meekly. And Steve, again playing with his biceps, came closer. Don't you want to apologize? Or do I dream of being fired from here? You must be at your workplace. Why should I follow you? Yes, I just stepped aside. "I've been here all the time," Kenny answered in a frightened voice. "However, this only provokes guests." "You don't want to apologize, so you're proud then," shouted Steve. He swept a vase off a nearby table, and it shattered against the wall. It was so abrupt that even the guys at the table flinched. Thunder outside the window added to the symphony of chaos. Then he overturned the table on which the vase stood, threw it to the other end of the hall. This seemed funny to the drunk guy. He had fun like a child, knowing that he would not get anything for it, and Steve got so excited that he attacked the unfortunate waiter and began to beat him. Kenny fell to the floor. It was only then that Steve stopped. "Give us a new waiter," they shouted from the table. "The old one has already ended. He passed away," one of his friends chuckled. Kenny barely got to his feet. His nose is bleeding. He was completely confused. "I've seen everything in my years here. But to be like this," Maya walked famously past Kenny. A short girl walked up to the drunken company and stood right in front of Steve. He was still laughing at his friend's joke. Maya was 2 heads shorter than him, but her gaze was so stern that Steve was a little taken aback. However, he laughed again after that. She seemed to him too small to be so formidable. "What else is this?" Half of the waiter came. "Give us the whole." The company burst into laughter again. Maya is already used to this kind of joke. Throughout her life, she heard 1 million and bullying for all motives about her height. It didn't bother her anymore. "What can you hit me?" "You can do everything, I understand. Kenny was trying to please you, and I'm not going to collect my drunken chaps. Get out of the cafe. You raised your hand against my colleague and started a massacre. What do you allow yourself in general?" Steve was hurt by her words. He stopped smiling. Maya herself did not understand what exactly worked. "Who are you?" hissed Steve with a grimace of disgust. "My name is Maya Adams, and I work here. Come on, run to Daddy and ask him to fire me. That's the only way you solve problems. Spoiled sissy, everyone here knows whose son you are. Only no one knows who you are, because you are nothing with me. What have you achieved in your life not through Daddy's money but on your own? You're just a snickering goat. I hate people like you. Come hit me if you want. I do not care. I won't run to complain. We both know it won't help. You will humiliate yourself with this, not me." Maya was furious. She was waiting for a slap in the face, but Steve was so taken aback that he did not even find what to answer her. Something happened that neither the one sitting at the table, nor Maya, nor the other waiters, who watched the development of the conflict with fear, happened. Steve glared at Maya and just ran away. He flew out of the cafe as if scalded because he had absolutely nothing to object to her. Instinct told him to hit her in the suit, but she found an argument for that. It was the first time in his life that he had been so nailed. He was humiliated and didn't know what to say. The drunk company paid off. Everyone's mood is going down considerably. Maya's eyes sparkled at everyone and went to Kenny. She was afraid that his nose was broken. Another waiter approached the guys. They have already subsided. "This is your bouncer," said one of the guys, took out a bunch of commemorative bills from his back pocket. They paid for the order, for the pogrom, for Kenny's broken nose, and left. Meanwhile, Maya was persuading a colleague to call a doctor, but Kenny refused. "Everything is fine. I will live," he said, choking with pain. Maya called the doctors anyway, and Kenny was taken for an X-ray. She stayed with the others to work. By evening, the rain had subsided, and couples were reaching out to the cafe. Almost all the tables were occupied, so she had enough work. Maya moved to the city not so long ago. "I went to study to be a doctor and began to look for a part-time job in my specialty. I wanted to get a job at the hospital, at least as a nurse, but due to lack of work experience, they did not take her. Maya is tired of running around interviews and hearing, 'We'll call you back.' So they answered every time they found out that she had no experience at all, but there was a desire to work. In addition, students are extremely reluctant to take. So she became a waitress in her incomplete 20s. Kenny was not close to her. was not her friend. They talked only on business topics. He was a very secretive and reserved person. Sometimes it seemed to Maya that he was angry with her, did not like her. She did not succeed in everything at the beginning of her work. Like everyone else, she made mistakes and dropped trays on cafe visitors. He never cursed, only told what to do next. However, he taught her everything. To be polite, to be professional. Kenny was the most valued of all the waiters and was the only one trusted to serve important customers and all sorts of different bigwigs. And only Kenny was engaged in training other waiters. He was older. He had more responsibility, and the authorities paid him more than the rest. Maya, on the other hand, was one of those who treated everyone around with parental care. She was responsible and never passed by injustice, often got into trouble, and sometimes it came out sideways to her. But she understood that she simply could not do otherwise. It's so right, which means it will be so. And Steve that day, having reached the house, felt wild nausea and spent several hours in the company of the toilet. Son can call a doctor. Concerned mother, now and then, approached the door. She knew that he periodically gets drunk and arranges drunken brawls. The incident in the cafe was far from the first. His father scolded him for this. Once he even hit me, but in their family the unspoken leader was still the mother. She was very characteristic, imperious, and immensely loved her only son. She also had a daughter, Lisa, who was in 5th grade. She doted on Steve. For him, the younger sister was, perhaps, the only person on earth for whom he would kill, for whom he died. Steve did not have a good relationship with his parents. His mother forced him to become an engineer, and Steve really had such inclinations. But he never liked this profession. Taking a bath, Steve played an imaginary guitar and dreamed of being a musician. But his mother pressed him, and he received his serious education. And here, in fact, celebrated the receipt of a diploma, master, the highest degree. Maya was not entirely right in her accusations. He received a diploma himself, but his parents really helped him to enter. He had to be brushed off a few times. He was on the verge of being expelled due to his behavior and explosive nature. One day, Steve threw a teacher out of a window. On another occasion, one stream organized a massive fight against another. All the damage always had to be compensated to the father, and to blush for everything to the mother. But having received his dose of abuse, he again took everything for his own. In his youth, he did indecencies more often and was skillful. But the years took their toll. Now he himself was ashamed of the actions of the past. The next day he woke up and got on the internet in the morning. What did she say her name was? Maya Adams. It seems to be so. And Steve found a profile on the social network and greedily scrolled through every single photo. He was caught in this occupation by a friend who was also yesterday in a cafe and also came with a sore head. What, Steve? It was the waitress who approved you yesterday, and you already found her that you want to intimidate? Will you take revenge? Sid asked and plopped down next to Steve on the bed. Then Steve turned to his friend in the swivel chair and shook his head. No, I will not. They all went. He gave out and closed her page. However, that evening, Steve again found her profile through the browsing history and looked at photos of Maya. For more than an hour, he remembered her arrogant look, stubborn chin. He did not remember everything, but something in her broke him at that moment. How did she do it? No girl had ever had such an impact on him in his life. He longed to see her, tried desperately to forget her again and again. She also hates him. Yes, what is it? A week has passed. Even Steve's mother noticed that her son was somehow different. Are you all right? She asked. Of course, all the way, he answered. He didn't even want to admit it to himself. After all, his thoughts constantly led him to that cafe, to her. If he hadn't started a pogrom there, he could have gone back and just had coffee and tried to talk to her. He was never shy in front of girls. On the contrary, such a handsome man, and even the son of the mayor, had more than enough girls. but he wouldn't dare approach her. That evening, Steve sat in the car under the windows of the cafe. Almost 3-0. He turned off the phone, turned on his favorite music, and waited for her. She left at the very end of her shift, warmly said goodbye to this Kenny. He still has bruises on his face. Steve grimaced in shame and embarrassment. Fortunately, the windows of his car were well tinted, and no one noticed his presence. "What's wrong with you, Maya?" "Too brash." "And what?" "You never know. I have seen arrogance and insolence," he thought quietly. And deciding that there was nothing special about her, he left. However, the next evening I was again at the cafe. This time she came out alone. "Wait. Wait." Maya turned around and saw him. "What?" She raised her eyebrows and looked at him with her signature look, full of unshakable confidence that Steve was just nobody. "I wanted to talk to you. Sorry, I overdid it that time." Maya didn't let him finish. "You went over and your gorgeous insides got out of you. My father, when he drinks, drags street cats home because he is kind inside. He begins to hug his mother and in love, and you hit people and destroy everything around. Everything is clear to me." Maya turned and walked on, but they caught up with her. "But why are you so categorical?" "Yes, it's obvious to you. You don't know anything about me, and you don't know me at all. How can you judge a person by one act?" Maya sighed wearily. "You did more than one thing that day. And I don't think it was your first such trick. You know, if you want to apologize, go to Kenny." "Did you break his nose?" Maya left, and Steve did not catch up with her anymore. "Okay. The first step has been taken. The matter remains small." The next day, Steve came to the cafe and went straight to Kenny. He was visibly frightened at the sight of the guest. "Hello. I came to ask for forgiveness. I was drunk, went too far." "Sorry, brother." Steve patted Kenny on the shoulder. It was embarrassing to look into his eyes. Kenny was taken aback. "Good," he replied. And Steve took an envelope out of his pocket and handed it to the waiter. "This is for treatment and for moral damage. I'm really sorry." "Sorry." Kenny accepted the envelope and Steve left. He didn't even ask if Maya was there, decided to pretend she didn't care. But Maya was there. When Steve left, she approached Kenny. "What did he want?" she asked. "He came to apologize and gave me this." Kenny opened the envelope and saw his half-year salary in it. His eyebrows went up in surprise. "Wow," he smiled. "I'll close the loan." Maya smiled at him too. "Great." Needless to say, the man's conscience stirred. Steve was waiting for her at the door that evening. In his hands was a bouquet of red roses. Maya was taken aback when she saw him again. "Hello, and I'm with you," he smiled. Maya was tired on the shift. She did not want to communicate, especially with him. "For what?" "I wanted to talk to you. This is for you." He handed her a bouquet. But Maya just shook her head. "I don't need anything from you. If I were Kenny, I would go to the police, record the beatings and sue you. Are you lucky he's kind?" She looked at him just as hard. Her chin was upturned. Her light blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail, which lay in a light cloud over her shoulders. She wore simple earrings, silver with a green stone that accentuated her green eyes. Slender, fragile, but there was so much feeling in her eyes that Steve took his breath away. She didn't care at all that her nails weren't manicured. And I don't care that there was almost no makeup on her face. I don't care what family she's from or if she has any money. There was something different about her. She was filled from within. Steve didn't realize it yet, didn't even admit it to himself, but he was in deep trouble. "Give me a chance. I want to prove that I'm not as bad as you thought of me," he said. Seriously, his voice was excited, and it seemed to him that he heard himself, as if from the outside. "A chance for what?" Maya asked. Steve suddenly realized what was too big for him. What will she say now? He realized that he had been waiting for this moment. All day I thought about the words, but they all fell into a big pile of unrelated letters. When he saw this waitress, and while he thought about it all, Maya stood and waited for an answer, and Steve just looked at her, and a red light burned in his eyes. System failure. It freezes like a computer when it encounters malware. Steve, Maya called him. Sounded like a song to him. She knows my name, and Steve broke into a smile. I think I'm in love. Tight as a sheep. I can't help myself. Even my hands are shaking. Look. Steve held out his hand and she really winced. He is nothing. Silent pulse beyond normal. In the knees and under the palms. Steve was confused. He himself was frightened that he confessed his love to her. Panic grew. Maya did not expect such recognition. She opened her mouth to say something, but found no words. How can you throw this at a person without warning? I'm sorry. What did you just say? She thought that perhaps she misunderstood him and should be clarified. She had no idea that the arrogant major, after she had read it, would come to confess his love to her. I think I love you, he blurted out again. He realized that the language was his enemy, and he was no longer his master. The head turned off and lost its control. Now his speech apparatus was connected only with his heart. I wanted to take a cold shower or punch myself in order to bring myself to a reasonable state. What he says, what loves her? I'm sorry, I have to go, Maya said. She was as confused as Steve and just ran away. And with great difficulty, he forced himself to stay in place with a bouquet of red roses. The guy threw flowers on the back seat, started the engine, and turned on the music in the car. Putting his hands on the steering wheel, Steve realized they were still shaking. Yes, what's wrong with him? Is it curable? Maybe visit the family doctor. He was angry with himself, took an ice-cold shower and felt better. Steve, are you going to have dinner? Mom asked, looking into her son's room. No, I don't want to, he replied. Steve, what's going on with you? She asked, entering her son's room. Steve's mom, Scarlett, was a tall, slender brunette with short, drinking hair. She wore a retro hairstyle. These were in vogue half a century ago. Always with makeup, always with makeup, always with long painted nails. Scarlett practically lived in beauty salons. I like one girl, but it's not mutual, he admitted. Mom smiled and sat on the edge of the bed. I'm glad you fell in love. Tell me, who is she? Is that the surgeon's daughter, Catherine? She asked with a smile. Steve shook his head. She's a simple waitress. Just a cafe girl. I am drawn to her like a magnet. Mom took Steve's hand affectionately. This is not serious. You can't connect your life with some waitress. We come from a noble family. None of us chose service personnel as our companions. Get her out of your head. And you better pay attention to Catherine, she said in a sweet voice. Steve raised his eyebrows and looked at his mother in surprise. What are you talking about? How can you choose who to fall in love with? You can, Steve, as much as you can. But for that matter, fall in love. You are free to anyone. Just do not drag the girl home, please. Walk with her and go back to the girls of your circle. You must understand. You will simply not be interested in each other. She has a different mentality. It's like marrying aliens. Steve chuckled. What's wrong with aliens? Nothing. In fact of the matter. But you will have nothing to talk to her. You are just different. Steve shook his head. All people are different. Now I feel that I have nothing more to talk about with you. You don't hear me, you don't understand. Is that how? Offended mother. She pursed her lips and left his room in English. Actually, for him, it was the best option at the moment. How can you explain to her what he feels? You can't show a blind man. The next evening, Steve sat outside the cafe at 3:00, but did not wait for Maya. Then he went inside. He was met by Kenny. Good afternoon, he said, more confidently than at the last meeting. Kenny knew now that Steve wasn't going to hit him anymore. This gave him confidence. "Hello." Steve held out his hand, and Kenny accepted a masculine greeting. "Is Maya here?" Kenny shook his head. "She has a day off today. Tomorrow there will be." "Yes, tomorrow she's on the evening shift as usual. Anything to give her?" Kenny asked. "No, no need." Steve left and returned the next day. In the evening, as usual, he waited for her and approached. This time he had no flowers in his hands. Maya looked at him warily and rolled her eyes. "Steve, I'm sorry, but there will be nothing between us. Leave. You have your life. I have mine. You know, you probably heard my words, then forgive me. I do not know you. You were right. But stop following me. You're scaring me already." Maya said it with as much gentleness as she could muster. Steve felt unbearable pain and clenched his teeth. He was rejected for the first time in his life. For the first time in his life, he fell in love and immediately got hit in the stomach. "I understand," he said, gritting his teeth. I got into the car and stepped on the gas. Steve drove at full speed. He wanted to break himself so that she would know about it and understand, so that she would feel at least something for him, at least pity, whatever. Steve slowed down, seeing the road ahead. It was dark and the city had long been left behind. He got out of the car. The road was dark and empty. On both sides of it were dense landings. Behind the paved road, he slammed the car doors and yelled at the top of his lungs. When his voice broke, he grabbed his head and looked up at the sky. In the city, the stars were not visible, even in cloudless weather, due to smog. And here, on the outskirts, they sparkled brightly. He suddenly thought that Maya would have liked it here, if she had even given him a chance. All the next week, Steve gritted his teeth, worked. He forbade himself to think about the waitress and was determined to put her out of his mind. But the second day, thoughts began to return him to her every now and then. On the third day, I had to get drunk with friends. He spent the whole evening telling them a tearful story about how he fell in love with a waitress and how she choked him with a heartless creature. Friends were shocked. They even sobered up. On the fourth day, Steve went to Catherine's. She was the daughter of a surgeon and often sang in a local cabaret. A girl who could outshine any Hollywood star. Smart and beautiful. Catherine had her eye on Steve for a long time. When he arrived, she kicked out her girlfriend and took out champagne. Steve was hungover all day. Tons of cognac drunk earlier made themselves felt even a day later. They sat and talked about life. Catherine told Steve how she entered the Theater Institute. "I sang terribly. You know I'm not a singer. I never studied it. And the girl who applied for the same place sang like a nightingale. Have you seen her eyes? When they took me, it was not her arrogant effigy. She thought the place was already hers, because she's so talented. But she just didn't know who she was dealing with. So now I will study as an actress." The beauty smiled. But Steve did not look at her and thought that Maya would answer her. "I would probably wash her. How can you be proud that you are worthless?" Steve suddenly realized that you yourself do not belong to this world. The world of the rich, empty show-offs, mediocrity, in whose life everything is decided by money. He was the same and like Catherine. He was proud of his involvement in him. But one meeting changed everything in his life. He wasn't like that anymore. God, what did she do to me? Steve was horrified. Suddenly he realized that Catherine was looking at him with raised eyebrows. He had not listened to her for a long time and thought about his own, and now he even began to talk to himself. That's how much this sleek girl was not interesting to him. "What are you talking about?" Catherine asked. "Doesn't matter." Steve remembered that Maya rejected him and that he was here precisely to forget her. So he simply reached out to Catherine and kissed her gently, removing the glass from his hand. Catherine smiled contentedly. An hour later, Steve was dressing in the bath, sitting on. They already had similar episodes. When Catherine left a guy, she came to Steve to console herself when, alas, she was not on a date. He went to her sometimes in the middle of the night. She never refused him. Their parents decided from childhood that the children would get married, that they would be the perfect match for each other. Catherine was set up with Steve, and Steve was forced to take a closer look at Catherine. They were friends, sometimes spent nights together. It was at night that Steve sincerely did not understand what he could talk about with her during the day. But Catherine, over time, kept an eye on Steve, as her father and mother advised. She found him funny, very likable and promising. Catherine did not just drive away everyone who was nearby. If he called and said that he would come now. She had feelings for him, but Steve didn't know about it. On the 5th day, Steve broke down, as if he were some kind of complete alcoholic. He was afraid that Maya would quit, and he would never see her again. He wanted to watch her around the clock. Let her not let you get close, but you don't have to be around. It is enough for him to simply observe her with at least one eye. But in the evening, friends came to visit him. They drank, and Steve was silent this time. He was in pain, somewhere very deep, at the very bottom of his soul. He smiled at his friends, but everyone saw that Steve got into the car on the 6th day and drove to the restaurant. He missed her during this time, and arrived even earlier. He saw through the window how she smiled at the customers. That evening, Maya was serving some guests with a bald head. He looked at her like meat, greedily greedy. He sat in the cafe until closing time and went out the door at the same time as her. They were talking about something at the cafe. Then the bald man began to pester her and grab her by the hand. He dragged Maya to the car, and Maya zealously beat him with her purse in the bath. He did not notice himself as he jumped out, rushed at the bald man with his fists. "Who will you give, beast? Have you reached out to my wife? Yes, I'll level you now with asphalt." Steve struck him one blow, then the second. The bald fell, but immediately got up and rolled back. "Boy, yes, I understand everything. I'm leaving." He is frightened to death to fence himself off from the stench with his hands. His nose was also broken. Maya stood aside, frightened, so fragile. Steve approached her when the bald man was already behind the floor of his car and gave it a gas. "How are you? Come to me." He hugged her, pressed her to him, and Maya did not resist. She was scared. She needed to be hugged at that moment. It was cold outside. Freezing rain drizzled. The road promised to turn into a skating rink by evening. Autumn was waning, preparing to give way to winter. "Thank you," Maya said, pulling away from Steve. He didn't stop her and took a step back. "Everything is fine?" he asked, anticipating that he would remember all night that he hugged his treasure. "Yes, thank you. I was afraid that he was dragging me into the car, and I was actually more scared for him. What are you carrying in that huge bag? Itself such a small crocodile will fit into a bag. Just feel sorry for the man. You would beat him to death. Well, or scolded like me. And he would go on a binge." Maya laughed. "Are you drunk?" She raised her eyebrows. Steve shrugged. "Yeah, where I just did not go. But you are everywhere. I held on for a week, honestly. You said no, and I left, but I couldn't. I've tried everything. What have you done to me?" Maya smiled. "See me, but only today," she said seriously. She was afraid to walk the dark streets after what had happened. Adrenaline was still raging through her veins. They were walking down the street, Steve holding her hand and smiling like a complete idiot. Has the ice broken? Yesterday he already thought about suicide, unable to withstand this delusion. They talked about all sorts of nonsense. Steve made her laugh all the time. She was so funny. With him, she was so funny. With him, she relaxed. She felt good. However, at the threshold, she said something that made Steve feel that real pain inside again. "Steve, I don't want to take advantage of your feelings. I'm sorry, but they're not mutual. I'm sorry. I don't feel the same, and I don't think that you and I are from the same universe." "In what sense? Is this from modern cinema?" Understand? She asked. He realized that they even have the same taste in films. She was definitely his other half. But for some reason, he felt it in every cell of his body. But she doesn't. What is all this for him? Why can't we be a couple? He asked. In her eyes, something flashed in the dim light of the lanterns and shabby 5-story buildings where Maya rented an apartment, and he suddenly felt reciprocity. He saw in her eyes that she didn't want to leave. They would have found 1,000 topics for conversation. They could have talked all their lives and would not have separated from each other. Because I am from an ordinary family and can hardly be a member of yours. Maya sighed and disappeared into the entrance. And where are they given it? She speaks exactly like his mother. Who cares who has how much money? He loves her, loves her, loves her madly. Steve walked towards the car and smiled. Nevertheless, this evening the ice broke, whatever one may say. It was obvious. He looked forward to further developments and fell asleep that evening of dreams. Maya no longer ran from him like fire. Steve began to accompany her home. True, Maya reminded him, every time that she did not like and did not want to give false hopes. Autumn gave way to winter, but Maya remained true to her word, and Steve to his feelings. He no longer drank at night with friends. He came to her cafe, waited for her, and escorted her home. Sometimes when she was not there, Kenny would come out and say that Maya was not there, so that he would not wait for her in vain. Of course, they did not become friends. But Kenny was able to forgive him and treated him like a human being. He invited me to sit in a cafe, wait for her there. Steve didn't hesitate to enter. Rather, he was ashamed, so he always refused. It was moving towards Christmas. Steve has arrived to invite you to celebrate Christmas with him. He was ready to take her anywhere she wanted, if only she agreed. Hello? Maya doesn't? Kenny said, seeing a familiar car. Steve raised his eyebrows. She doesn't work on holidays, he asked. Kenny shook his head. No, I asked. I went to celebrate Christmas with my family in the village. What kind of village can you tell me? He asked. Kenny shrugged. I don't know, to be honest. She said somewhere outside the city an hour away. Where exactly? No information. Steve cursed. And you do not have the opportunity to look like that in her documents. Maybe there is an address there? Kenny frowned. There is no boss. Now I will try. Wait here. He left and was gone for 15 minutes. Steve waited, already thinking that Kenny had simply forgotten about him. But soon he came out with a note. That's the registered address. Don't tell me I gave it to you. I could be in serious trouble, Kenny said. And Steve beamed. Thank you, brother. Thank you very much, you just saved me. Honestly. Steve drove home, took things, and without hesitation, went to the car. Son, where are you? Asked his mother, as always, beautiful in a silk dressing gown. And, as always, with a glass of wine. I'm going to celebrate Christmas with my girlfriend, said Steve. He was not going to hide, to say what his mother would like to hear. After all, it was she who taught him all his life to tell only the truth. You still haven't forgotten that waitress? She was horrified. I love her moms and everything. I can't help myself. If I could, then of course I fell in love with the one you say. Steve said it with undisguised sarcasm and went to the door. Steve, you're ruining your life. The story of Princess Diana ended badly. Your waitress will just be awkward around us. So we will leave your clumsy circle and build our own circle, where everything will be clever, he answered, and left, slamming the door. Why doesn't she understand that he has his own life, in which only he can decide who to love and who to be with? On the way to the village, Steve's phone rang. He ignored the calls, but gave up on the 6th. It was Catherine. Yes, he called into the phone. Hello, are you busy with something? The girl asked uncertainly. I'm busy with something, he replied rudely. It pissed him off the way his mom handled the whole situation. Steve did not exclude that it was she who called Catherine and persuaded her to call. You're upset about something. Something happened. Nothing matters. I'm sorry, did you want something? Steve exhaled. Catherine hardly deserved the rudeness. You haven't been here for a long time, so I decided to call myself. Well, you know, I miss these meetings of ours so much. And you miss, to be honest, she admitted. Steve decided to shoot from the shoulder. He must be honest. You're sorry, but there will be no more meetings. Have you got someone? Catherine asked timidly. Yes, I have someone appeared. Catherine laughed for some reason. Well, not the first time. Well, I'll wait. You return to our meetings every time. Agree I'm the best option for you. Are you the best choice for me? Are you the best choice for me? I, too, periodically, someone appears, but I always find myself with you. Or are you with me? Steve shook his head. He regretted that he went to her that night. It was another stupidity out of desperation that was supposed to help him forget Maya. But it didn't help. This time it's different. I'm telling you seriously, I won't be with you again. Let's be friends if you want. If you don't want to, we'll be nobody. Catherine stopped smiling. Steve didn't see her lips tremble, her palms sweat. So, that's how I'm only good for a while. Don't start. We never had anything serious. We didn't promise each other anything. If I had known that you would begin to lament like Casanova's wife, I would not have met you. Catherine hung up, but Steve gritted his teeth and called her back. You can't build your own happiness by making other people unhappy. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know it meant something to you, he said when the girl picked up the phone. She sobbed softly, smearing tears down her cheeks. Now you know. So what is next? Have you really met someone better than me? Catherine asked, confident that there could be no one better. No, she's not better than you. She's just a waitress. Doesn't look like you at all, but I fell in love with her, so it's scary. I depend on her even worse when I'm with her. I don't care enough for her. I'm just burning her up. Catherine threw the phone against the wall, and it shattered. She came in crying. Steve realized that he had opened up to her in vain, but he had it on his tongue. He thought that she would understand him. At least she would. Then, Steve rode in complete silence and darkness. The blizzard has begun. The car was thrown from side to side. With all this love, Steve skipped the season with the replacement of summer tires with winter ones. The navigator showed that there was very little left to go, and the village already appeared in front. When the car skidded, once again she pulled off the road. Steve remembered at the very last moment that he hadn't been wearing his seatbelt. He felt the car roll over. Then once again, from a strong blow to the head, he passed out. It is not known how much time has passed. Steve opened his eyes and saw Maya in front of him. She managed to open the car door. She was wearing a light headscarf and a short gray jacket. There was fear in his eyes. Steve felt his face covered in blood. His head was buzzing, his hands barely clenched. He was cold. Come on, we need to get you out of here as soon as possible. It got quite dark. Maya was visible only because she was shining a flashlight. I must have died and gone to heaven, Steve said. Maya helped him get out of the car. If you had died, then you definitely would not have gone to paradise, Maya replied. She led him down the snowy road. My footprints are already covered, she said. I found you here by accident. You're lucky that Grandma lives on the outskirts. I saw a car on the road and realized that someone had flown to the side of the road. This is not uncommon for us. What are you doing here? Steve could barely walk. He was embarrassed by the blow. His head was spinning. The wound on the top of his head hurt. I found out where you live and came to you. For what? I came for 3 days, only for the holidays. Well, what am I going to tell my grandmother now? And if your father sees you here? Maya said indignantly. I'll meet your family. Great, great. Maybe they will tell me how to forget you. because I've even been to the doctor. Do you know what he answered me? Maya smiled. What are you, incorrigible fool? That I'm a fool in love, and there's no cure for that. No, I will probably die because there is no cure, and I only get worse. But you should know it will only be because of you. It's clear. You have a concussion. I will tell my parents that you are just an acquaintance of mine, went to your grandmother in a neighboring village, and flew off the road. Don't tell anyone you were coming to me. This is not accepted here. Understood? As you say, my little general. Maya brought Steve home. The house was broken into wooden floors everywhere, and only in the hall lay the palace. Grandmother Maya began to fuss. Since she was a doctor, that's what Maya said. How many fingers am I showing? She asked. Steve saw an embarrassed middle finger in front of him and raised his eyebrows. One. Grandmother, Maya exclaimed. The old lady laughed. This is what my granddaughter taught me. He stayed with us in the summer, he says. Grandma, this torch is a fashionable sign. They greet each other like that with comrades. You won't understand this modern fashion of yours, she said, waving her hand. Maya and Steve looked at each other and laughed. When the grandmother went out for alcohol, they burst out laughing. You have an amazing grandmother. I'll probably fall in love with her if I stay here long. Maya smiled. You scared me. I recognized your car and couldn't bring you back to consciousness. She hit you on the cheeks, but you did not react and, it seems, did not breathe. I thought you died. Steve smiled. Would you be upset if I died? He asked. Maya pursed her lips and gave him a hard fist on the shoulder. Do not say that. I'm ready to die if it makes you feel anything for me. Maya looked at him for the first time with that loving look. Didn't it seem to you that he would now lose consciousness from joy or from a concussion? From that moment began the magic that lasted another 2 years. Maya and Steve spent Christmas together. And Steve did not know that people in the villages had so much fun. There, everyone rode down a huge slide onto cartons. They laughed and threw snowballs at each other. He and Maya frolicked in the village square like little children. True, Steve got the moment when she slipped, picked her up in his arms and pulled her to him. He hugged her and kissed her, and she didn't hit him, didn't get angry. Softly and prepared, she kissed back. She didn't tell her parents that she was head over heels in love with her. She only said that she knew him a little since he came to them in a cafe, helped and left him for all 3 days, since the snowfall did not stop, and Steve might have had a concussion. However, the grandmother immediately understood everything. The young man is spoiled, but he loves you very much. I'm not your parents. I see everything. He came here to you, Grandma Maya said when they were busy in the kitchen on Christmas Eve. Parents also came. They had a family tradition of getting together at Christmas. It does not matter who and where was on that day. The family gathered in full force. Steve was glad to be among them. Maya's father played the accordion masterfully. Her aunt sang adult ditties with such enthusiasm that it became fun for everyone. Homemade on the face dispersed quickly, but everyone remained in the ranks. And when the clock struck 12, everyone made a wish and went to watch the fireworks outside and shouted Merry Christmas to each other. Steve gently held Maya's hand. He made a wish on Christmas night so that the next year he would return here already as the groom of the Maya. When the two of them returned to the city, Steve came home and met there with a terribly unhappy mother. I called you all the holidays. Where have you been? Again got drunk with friends and play tricks? No, I celebrated this Christmas with the Mayan family. Maya, this is my girlfriend, that waitress I told you about. I will marry her. He threw casually, passing by his mother. On that day, a scandal erupted in the house. Steve didn't want to hear anything. He said he would leave home if his parents interfered with his relationship. And he said that he would give up everything, but would be with her even at the cost of his own life. Steve's mother was broken. She lost this argument, and her son began to look for an apartment. Catherine lived alone for a long time, At the age of 17, her father gave her his apartment. Steve also wanted to live on his own, but his mother wouldn't let him. Steve brought Maya home and introduced him to his parents. His father greeted her and accepted his son's choice. Mom, in order to avoid another scandal, Maya also smiled. But as soon as they were left alone, she said, "You understand that this is only his whim. He will play with you and leave. My son is an elegant male. There's nothing to be done here. I just don't want you to be excruciatingly hurt later. Besides, even if he decides to marry you, I'll tell you right away you won't get anything. My husband will force you both to sign a marriage contract. So if you're interested in money, that's not an option, honey." Maya got up from the table. "I understood everything. Thanks for stopping pretending. I saw from the first minute that you look at me as an enemy of the people. But I will disappoint you too. I do not need your money. Steve loves me. I love him. That's all. And we will be together. Do you want it or not? Now is it not the 17th century for parents to decide for their children with whom they should marry? You think a lot about yourself, girl." That's what Steve heard in the kitchen and immediately flew to the showdown. "I'm leaving. Steve, I'll be waiting for you at home. I'm not welcome here." Maya gave Scarlett a scornful look and left. Steve shook his head, looking at his mother. "I said what I think," she shot back. And Steve left with Maya that night. The next day, he moved his things to her. A week later, Steve rented a nice apartment for the two of them, and they began to live together. Maya continued to work in a cafe, and Steve's now a frequent visitor there. Kenny had gotten used to it long ago, and the last incident was completely over. And if the visitors lost colleagues, Steve boiled over and threw out the lousy visage. Because of this, the owner of the establishment scolded him. But Steve wasn't the type to swear at with impunity. "Do you think it's normal that your employees get dirty?" he asked. The owner of the establishment sighed. "No, but you can't throw everyone out of the cafe in a row." "That's how." "So you encourage this kind of behavior from your customers? Let the slap your waiters, if only they left a bigger tip." "Perhaps you should tell your father about this," Steve asked. Chief Maya shook his head. "All right, do as you please," he said. When Steve found out that Maya was pregnant, he was in seventh heaven, decided to tell his parents everything and share his joy. Steve hoped that his grandson would help smooth out all the corners and the relationship between them would improve. He wanted to have a friendly family, like Maya. "First, convinced that the child is from you," his mother whispered into the phone. He understood his mother did not accept his choice, but he was not going to give up his happiness. Steve loved falling asleep next to her and waking up. When Maya found out about the pregnancy, she started talking to the baby from the very first months. Maya immediately said that she would have a boy. She felt that way, and she often sang to him an old lullaby that she used to sing to her. Her beloved grandmother. In the war, he listened to it, and sometimes he fell asleep under it. Like small children, he was absolutely happy. When Maya was already in her 9th month, Steve left his father's company on a business trip. Maya often came to work with Steve. His father treated the girl well, but did not dare to tell his wife about it. He often invited Maya to his house for tea. I bought her the best prenatal vitamins. He liked to touch his tummy, feeling how his future grandson was kicking. Maya found a second father in him, in Alsborough, in Maya's family. Everyone was accepted as a native, and from the first day they began to consider a member of the family. 3 weeks before the birth, something happened that crossed out everything in Maya's life. She had no idea that that morning she would see Steve for the last time. He, as always, hugged her, kissed her, said that he loved her very much, and told her to call if she needed anything or if she felt bad. Maya called him to ask how the day was going, but he did not answer. At the end of the day, Scarlett knocked on her door. Maya opened and let her into the house. "Steve is dead," she reported. "How did he die?" Maya fell unconscious. Scarlett called an ambulance for her and went with her. Maya's water broke. Where are you taking me? This is not my hospital, she said, coming to her senses. They are taking you to where they are ready to receive you now, Scarlett explained. Maya felt the first contractions and grimaced. How did this happen to Steve? She asked, unable to believe. The car swerved into the oncoming lane. He died. Scarlett showed Maya the phone in which he had already been photographed from her son's car. Next to her lay a corpse in a black sack. The accident happened in the morning. Someone already posted the news. Scarlett's lips trembled. She herself was shocked. Maya cried, but the new contraction forced her to focus on more important things in childbirth. The little man wanted to be born. Is my son really going to be born? Is my son really going to be born on the day his father died? Maya felt that she could not stand it all. You will need time to be alone. I want to take my grandson. It is unlikely that you will give him a better upbringing education than I do. You are still young and will give birth to more children and get married. And my son just died. Give the child to me, Scarlett said. Maya's blood pressure rose. She felt outraged. I wanted to hit her, kick her out, but the new fight did not allow me to swear strongly. Never. This is my child. What are you wearing? You're out of your mind. God sees. I wanted the best, said Scarlett. The ambulance arrived at the hospital. Maya was given an injection and passed out. When Maya woke up, the nurse told her that the baby was stillborn. Your mother-in-law said you fainted. This fall could have resulted in the death of the fetus, the nurse said. I'm sorry, but you can give birth again. Our doctors have made sure that your reproductive function is not affected. Everything will be fine. It just needs to be experienced. Maya sobbed for several hours and then got out of bed despite the prohibitions and came to the chief physician's office. I want to see my dead child, she declared, barely standing up. The doctor looked at her seriously and pursed his lips. Dead, dead? Maya nodded. This is impossible. I personally operated on you. More than a day has passed. He has already been taken away. Where? Where? Yes, where it should be. And I'll tell you, the child was with disabilities. I don't know why you weren't told about this earlier. But you can give birth again. Maya fell to her knees. Please. My fiancé is dead. I don't believe the baby is dead either. You must show it to me. Tell me, where can I see it? I'll just take a look. My mother-in-law, she could bribe doctors. I don't believe. The baby was alive. I felt a stir in the ambulance and he was normal. I went through all the tests. I personally operated on you. Trust my 30-year experience, the baby was not normal. Deviations could be fixed during screening. Unfortunately, this happens, especially if it is done in cheap hospitals, where doctors do not care about the patient. And if you keep throwing tantrums, I'll see to it that you are taken to a psychiatric hospital. Believe me, you won't get out of there anytime soon. Maya called her parents, and an hour later, she was taken from the hospital. Having recovered a little, she visited her mother-in-law's house. She let her in. On the table was a photo of Steve with a black frame. Scarlett wasn't black. You took him, my child. Scarlett wept. I swear not. I saw him. Indeed, he died. You were unconscious, but I insisted, and the doctor showed it to me. I couldn't believe it either. She was crying out loud, and Maya confessed that from that moment on she was left alone. Maya left the house of her failed mother-in-law. She got into her father's car and left. She did not know that at that moment a child's cry was heard in her house. Scarlett hurried to the child. The boy was born perfectly healthy and looked very much like Steve. She threw off her black handkerchief as she walked and wiped away her tears. Wow! The acting courses that she took in her youth were not in vain. Scarlett took the child in her arms and brought it to Steve, who was lying in a cast. The doctors say you've recovered. Here is your son. I'm sorry Maya didn't survive the birth. The doctors said she had some kind of pathology. Forgive me, but now we are alone. But nothing. I am raising Frank and I will cure you, and everything will be fine with us," Scarlett said. Steve suffered a head injury in that accident. A business partner of the company who was traveling with him in a car crashed to death in it when a truck crashed into it. Steve got lucky. The seatbelt saved him. After that skid on the road, he always wore a belt when he called, and they told her that her son had died, and she almost went mad with grief. Arriving at the identification, she realized that a mistake had occurred, but decided to arrange everything in a way that was beneficial to herself. Scarlett lied to Maya, bribed the head of the maternity hospital, who was her old acquaintance, and took the child for herself. She told her husband and son that Maya did not survive childbirth. Steve heard everything, understood everything, but did not react. He seemed to be out of his mind. He was silent and didn't say anything. For the first months, doctors attributed it to a head injury. But later, when everything should have been restored, the doctors diagnosed Steve with severe depression. 4 years passed. Scarlett and her husband began to take Steve to the doctors. He was silent, did not speak to anyone. Psychiatrists established that these were the consequences of a severe emotional shock, since all the physical consequences of the accident were eliminated. The injuries healed, the hematomas resolved, and I had to raise my grandson myself. But sometimes it wasn't strong enough. Where to go? After all, Maya died in the hospital. Scarlett bit her lip. She already regretted that everything was so arranged. When Frank was very young, he cried all the time and stopped taking care of himself. She did not sleep, forgot the taste of wine, and in beauty salons they no longer remembered how she looks. From a glossy lady, she turned into a noisy housewife and began to break down on her husband. She was nervous because her beloved son did not come to his senses. He seemed to have lost touch with reality. Steve ate, went to the shower, but he had to be directed to these actions. If you didn't approach him, he lay on the bed and was silent. He could speak, but he did it so rarely that at home he was already considered deaf and dumb. And for all these 4 years, she was afraid that only her parents would come. She managed to forge documents in such a way that Maya was not entered on the birth certificate, as if she had abandoned the child. And I didn't have to bribe a lot of people. Most of all, she was afraid that her husband would find out about her deceit. He wouldn't forgive her for that. Scarlett saw that he and Maya were friends. Things were not going well for my husband. Their family had to sell a huge house and move into an ordinary 3-room apartment. There wasn't much room. Steve hardly left his room. He was indifferent to everything, including the child. Scarlett tried to stir him up. She said that this is the son of Maya. I would like Steve to come to his senses and raise their common son. But Steve, hearing about Maya, only went into himself even more. He could hide in a corner and moan like a madman. Periodically, Scarlett showed him to various specialists, sending him to the hospital for treatment, but nothing helped. Frank was 4 years old when Scarlett called the ambulance. "Come, please. My child is very sick. I don't know what's wrong with him." She was in a panic. Medicines didn't help. At night, the baby became worse. Their family doctor does not work at night. In addition, he immediately told Scarlett that the child should be treated by a pediatrician. Frank didn't sleep. The fever was so strong that she feared for the life of the child. A young girl entered the door. She was accompanied by an adult doctor. They looked at the child, and the doctor told his colleague to give the child an injection. Frank burst into tears, and a girl in a white coat took him in her arms and began to hum a lullaby. There was nothing special about her, but she was very rare and had never heard such a thing. The doctor sang songs, and the child stopped crying. Maya gave him an injection so that the baby did not even cry. Suddenly, Steve entered the room. The girl took off her glasses and stared at him like he was a ghost. Maya suddenly realized that the woman who opened the door of this apartment for her knowingly seemed familiar to her. Scarlett has changed a lot in these 4 years. She got better, changed her hair. Now there is no time to take care of yourself. She devoted all of herself to the child, since she herself deprived him of his mother and believed that she now had no right to disown him. "Steve," Maya said. "Maya, my Maya, it's you. You did die. They told me you died." They hugged and cried. Scarlett quietly left the room. Maya asked a colleague, telling him the whole story. She stayed there with the child because Scarlett just disappeared. She realized that she would not be forgiven. Maya did not let go of her child, unable to believe that all this was happening. In the evening, when Father Steve came home, he was shocked. The man hugged Maya, hugged his son, who came to his senses. Steve didn't speak well. The speech apparatus has lost the habit of words over the years, but now he was on his own. Maya took a vacation at her own expense. She did not let go of her son. No wonder, because Maya almost killed herself when she was told about the death of Steve and the death of her son during childbirth. And Father pulled her out of the noose and forced her to live on. Maya devoted herself to her work and became an intern at the hospital. Scarlett packed her things and went to live with a friend in Israel. She filed for a divorce remotely and never showed up again. Not to the husband. Steve made a full recovery and went back to running the company. Maya continued to work as a doctor. True, now she is expecting a second baby and is preparing to go on maternity leave. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.